There are hundreds of studies.
Love it. Give me a statistic.
That show that not only is culture the leading predictor of future profitability, but it's also the leading predictor of future growth. It's important for them to get that information. So when people say, well, I'm too busy to do that, I'm like, oh, wow, hang on a second. This is the leading predictor of future growth and profitability, and you don't have enough time to manage that. What are you doing? Okay? Because when you're not managing that, you're not taking care of your customers, you're not hanging on to your good people, revenue's going to suffer, profit's going to suffer. So tell me what's more important than putting your cultural systems in place.
You're listening to the Isn't That Rich podcast, and we're your hosts, Jill Franks
and Ashley McVicker. As young females in the banking industry, we love simplifying the confusing yet everyday questions you have about money.
Like, how do I get my finances in order?
Where is my money really going?
How do I invest for my future?
How do I make my money work for me?
Can I really afford to buy that new home?
These are the questions that keep us up at night. And the truth is, no one was born knowing how to handle their finances.
And chances are, walking into a bank to ask for help seems intimidating.
Whether you're a single person in your early 20s saving for your first home,
or you're an empty nester wondering what to do with that extra spending cash,
this is the podcast for you.
Today we're talking all about company culture. And 7 years ago, Farmers State Bank enrolled in a company culture transformation. It has completely changed the way we do business as a bank. And today our special guest on this episode is the person who helped us lead that transformation.
That's right. Sales and Marketing Management magazine named Roxanne Emmerich one of the top 12 most requested speakers in America for her unparalleled ability to transform lackluster workplaces into high-performing, let's rock this job cultures.
As CEO of the Emmerich Group, her clients typically see sales growth improvements of 35 to 220% within 9 months of starting her process. Additionally, over half of her clients make a best place to work list within the first 24 months because her method shows team members how to rock their job and catapult their tide to profit performance.
She's a New York Times bestselling author of Thank God It's Monday, How to Create a Workplace You and Your Customers Love, and a 3-time Entrepreneur of the Year award winner. She is a member of the Speakers Hall of Fame and has received the Nito Quabain Philanthropist of the Year award for her work funding over 30 schools in Africa.
Roxanne has advised the senior executives of some of the most respected businesses in the world and has founded and is chair of the Institute for Extraordinary Banking. She has spoken to more than 3,000 audiences, including Coca-Cola, Prudential, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Lockheed Martin.
We're extremely honored to have this conversation today with America's leading culture transformation specialist and lover of chocolate, Miss Roxanne Emmerich.
Welcome, Roxanne.
I'm so thrilled to be here with you ladies. What a wonderful podcast you're putting on. I watched your last one. It was fantastic.
Well, we're so glad that you're here with us today.
Yes. We are hopeful after listening to this episode that our viewers can walk away with some tangible ways to improve their company culture.
Yeah. So, Roxanne, in your introduction, we learned that you wrote this book called Thank God It's Monday. But do people actually say that? I mean, is that something people actually want to go to work? Thank God it's Monday?
I don't think I said thank God it's Monday until I started working at Farmers. So.
Right. Well, sadly, most people don't. And if you look at the national statistics, people hate their job for the most part, and they're tolerating it. And it is a job as opposed to a get to. Sadly, that is the norm, but it doesn't need to be, because most organizations are not on purpose, nor do they control all the crazy making behaviors that go on within companies that the companies allow.
That's so true. So you're known as America's leading culture transformation specialist. How did you become?
That's a great question. Okay, so I know it was listed by the Speakers Bureau as being the top speaker on the topic, but for me, this has been a lifelong passion. I mean, I remember when I first started working in a bank, I thought to myself, gosh, they must have passed around a memo before I came that said, whatever you do, don't smile and don't have any fun at work, because nobody seems to have any fun. And I thought, what is it that makes it have to be a burden? Why do people have to come and leave their personality check at the door? Why can't people have fun? Why can't people be joyful? Why can't people be really good with their clients and make a profound difference in their lives? Because nobody ever calls home and says, hey, honey, today I performed average. I mean, we don't do that.
no.
We call home when we kick some back end and we made something miraculous happen. We all want to feel like we're really good at what we do. And we do that by making a difference in people's lives. And people don't understand culture. They just think, is it a happy place? Yeah, it's a happy place with less dysfunction. Then there's no company without dysfunction, but with a lot less dysfunction. But what's most important is, are the people there making a difference with their lives? Are they rising to the occasion? Are they bringing a level of skill set that transforms the world for their customers, like you do at Farmer State? I mean, what you guys are doing with your accredited banking professionals, it's mind-boggling the difference that you're making in those people's lives. And in most banks, they're not doing that. They're just kind of showing up and breathing. But it's not just banks. So before I started specializing in banking, I worked in all industries, and we're probably bringing, a lot of our banks are asking us to do this for their clients as well. So we'll probably be opening up that as well, because so many people are struggling right now. They're not happy at work. But the small business owners, they're in the struggle too, because they're like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get this culture thing to work? And they start to lose their confidence, thinking like, I should be able to do this. And yet the people are all acting crazy, and they're all hating each other and doing nefarious things to each other, as opposed to supporting each other, showing the love, being kind, and getting purposeful about their work. It's something that has to change fast.
Yeah.
So I love what you just talked about, small businesses and community banking, and how you are like a professional in community banking, and that's where you started. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of a community bank in a small town community and their impact with a small business, essentially?
When I invited Brian Tracy to be on my board for the Institute for Extraordinary Banking, he had said to me, of course I will do that, because he said small businesses only thrive because of community banks. It's not the big banks that make this difference. It's the community banks that get it done. And he said, when the last community bank leaves a community, you see the brain drain, you see the small businesses drying up, everything changes. And he said, when the last community bank leaves a community, and when that last community bank goes out, so goes America.
Wow.
So there are people who are very wise about business who understand it is community banks that have the backs of small businesses. Because you go to a big bank and you have some problems in your small business, good luck on that.
Right.
You're probably going to lose your business. And so, you need a bank that has a backbone to stand by you and do things for you and help coach you to become a better business, as opposed to just finance alone, because any computer can do that these days.
Yeah. And there are so many more out there, many more options now. So,
Well, let's talk about those options, because people are thinking, well, I can get a better price. Well, good luck on that. So, so I think about farm credit. And so, the last time we went through the triple storm where the price of land came down, the price of commodities came down, and interest rates went up. Ask your neighbors, how did Farm Credit handle that compared to your local community bank? Okay, because they all remember, oh, oops, that's a problem. So like right now, it's like, oh, there's great rates at Farm Credit. Well, great. And what's important to you, the interest rate that you're receiving, or the fact that you'll be in business 10 years from now?
Yeah.
And so understanding that, you're working along with a partner here who's really going to have your back, but also as someone who's going to be teaching you how to run your operation better, run your small business better. That kind of stuff matters a lot. And I know that you guys are doing things to help your customers with fraud. Every small business owner should be terrified about fraud right now. If they're paying attention, like I send all of my team members through fraud training, and I just had I just finished a fraud training, and I was about to do a live event for a whole day, and I was about to go on live, and I get this text from my son saying, "Hey, Mom, I lost my phone, and keep this number." I said, "Okay," and my phone's next to me, and I'm like going live or whatever, and then he says, "I just need help with one thing. I need to pay a bill today. Can you help me out?" Sure. Because I'm like presenting, and I'm live, and then I'm thinking, I better check with my son at his other number and see. And sure enough, I just finished a fraud training, and there it was. But I know that at Farmer State, you offer a way to teach small businesses how to protect themselves, because it's not just about the fraud insurance. That's too late.
It's fraud prevention.
It's fraud prevention, and if a small business owner isn't terrified right now, they're not paying attention, because they can be wiped out overnight by not knowing these things.
It's everywhere. You can't get away from it.
It is.
And I want to go back to your book because I just read it for the second time this week. And something I really found interesting when it pertains to company culture is that you talk about having a result focused company culture. And I really didn't understand what that meant until we enrolled in this company transformation. Can you talk a little bit about what it means to be results focused?
I would be delighted to. So Business Week had a study years ago, and they asked 6,000 employees from different companies, do you perform in the top 10%? Fascinating that 90% of employees said, I perform in the top 10%. Well,
Yeah.
Either they're really bad at math, or some, or they're delusional. But the problem is that in most organizations, people think that they're performing as rock stars, but they don't know what rock star looks like. And so, and that's a big problem. So, here's the thing. If you have a happy bus with a great culture, but it's not tied to performance, then what's that culture going to look like when you start doing your layoffs? Because you're going to have layoffs during tough economic times if you're not having every person knowing how they tie to profit on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. So we need to do a couple things. We need to teach them what profitability are we expecting. I mean, how do you tie to profit in your job? And then how are you doing on that so that when those tough economic times come, it doesn't matter. Jill gets to stay because Jill can prove here's the economic impact that you're having in the organization. You can't afford to get rid of Jill, and you're no longer in that scarcity crisis that most organizations go through during tough economic times.
Being an employee in that situation, when you're tied to profit, and we talk about this a lot with you when we do training with you, is when you're tied to profit and you can actually see it makes you excited to come to your job. I mean, getting up in the morning, there's a reason for getting up in the morning to get to your job. You're tied to performance. So
I talked to Christine, your president, yesterday, and she said, my daughter said to me, Mom, I can tell you just love your job. And she goes, I do. She says, I used to work for a different bank, not the same experience, but I do. I absolutely love it. And I think, for Christine, she's so tied to the customers. She's so tied to the knowing. She's making a ridiculous impact on everybody that she touches. How can you not love that job? I mean, that's a job. That's what this is about. And so, but for most people, they're thinking, oh, I need to go find that job. Well, it's not find that job. It's be that person and rise to that occasion. And as a business owner, it's be that organization that allows that education for your people to know how they tie to profit, because they're trying. They meanwhile, they're coming in early, they're staying late. They just don't know that they're wasting a lot of time on the extraneous and not being very good at the few things that really matter.
And let's talk about that. We say, leaders and the business owner, you need to lead this change, and that's all good and well, but how can an employee be the leader of company culture change? Oh,
I have a great story about that. There was a young woman years ago in one of our banks that we were working with, and she had terminal cancer. And she was a beautiful young woman, and she'd gone into remission, so she came into the bank, and her job was to meet people at the door and greet them and take them different places, whatever. And she was the soul of that organization. She was love on wheels. She was happy. She was joyful. She was in her 20s, and she had terminal cancer. She knew she wouldn't make it another 5 to 7 years. And yet she could find joy. And I know people who they get a hangnail and they have to go home early, right? They're like, oh, my life is terrible. How am I going to deal with this whole thing? I got something to complain about. Are we complainers, or are we people who are using advancing language and making the world a better place? Because at every moment, people are either breathing life into life or they're sucking it out. But we're never neutral. And people don't understand that we're never neutral. And they don't even understand that their face is making a difference in the world, and that they got to control their face and get control of that thing.
It's interesting that you tell that story, because I remember when I started working for the bank and then I was moving my money from a prior bank, I remember walking in there to get my cashier's check and close my account out, and I was like, this place is miserable. There was nobody. I was like, I don't even know who to go to. The teller was like, what are you doing here? I was like, I don't know. Aren't you the person that works here and is supposed to help me? So yeah, those people do make a difference, especially just greeting. And
I have a great story. When I first moved our business to Minneapolis, we're now down in Florida, but when we moved to Minneapolis, I didn't know anybody in Minneapolis, and I had started a bank in Wisconsin, but it was you couldn't go across state lines back in those days, and so I didn't know any of the banks. So I did the obvious thing. I went to the bank next door, thinking, well, this will be easy because I can run deposits over quickly. This will be great. So I walked in, and nobody made eye contact. It was just like all heads were down. And so I'm looking around thinking, where do I go? Because I want to open a business checking account and I can't see any place to go. And so I walk in, all I can see is parts disease, just parts.
When they start using that.
Yeah. And so finally there are 3 tellers and they're having a conversation and they're ignoring me. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm the only either customer or non-customer in the bank. And they're having their conversation. They're not even saying, so, hey, how are things? Like, how can we help you today? Nothing. And so finally, I'm getting a little bit annoyed because I'm thinking it's Monday morning. I got a
Get
job.
out of here.
I got to get to work. And nobody's waiting on me. So I finally said, excuse me. They didn't say anything. I said, excuse me. And finally I said, excuse me a third time. And this young woman looks up kind of like, what? Like, how dare you?
What are you doing
interrupt
here?
our personal conversation here? And I said, I'm looking to figure out where do I need to go to open a business checking account. She says, go to the book, sign in, someone will call for you. And I'm thinking, whoa. And at this point, I'm thinking, this is never going to be my bank, but this is going to be research at this point. And so I continued to watch, and I sat down, and I'm watching how everybody's talking to each other. They're gossiping about each other. They're all miserable human beings and just not enjoying each other at all. And finally, after about 5 minutes, this woman closes her Minneapolis Tribune. I'm watching her read it. And she goes over to the book, doesn't make eye contact with me, crosses off my name, yells out, Roxanne Emmerich. And I'm thinking, I'm the only person not on payroll here. Like, hello. Like,
it's me.
Right next to the book, that person.
Yeah.
And so clearly she had a shtick that she did. And so then she says, oh, follow me. And it's like, you never have somebody follow you. You walk alongside of them. It's a courtesy, right? And we sat down, and she said, what can I do for you today? And I said, I was thinking about opening a business checking account. And she said, I need your social security card and your driver's license. And I'm thinking, great getting to know you too. I mean, there was no connection whatsoever that where she was trying to have any kind of connectivity with me. And so I clearly that's not my bank, but I'm thinking, man, if she just would have said, so, what brings you, what kind of business do you have? Oh, how long you been in business? Oh, what do you do? How many employees? Did your family move with you? Oh, she could have opened up a mortgage or this or that. What'd she get? Nothing, because she had no idea how to connect. And that's what culture is do your people show that they care? Yeah. Because in most places, especially since the pandemic, I don't know what happened in your local market here, but in Minneapolis, where I live in Florida, to some extent, like you go to the restaurants and you get the little tape on the door saying, open or closing today at 2:00 because nobody's working anymore. And it's like nobody wants to work at these places because they're not happy when they're there. And they can't find employees. Like, you can't find employees because as an organization, you're not the least bit attractive. Nobody wants to date you right now. You're just not fun to be around. And so we have to create workplaces where it's a joy to be at work.
I love what you said. You said something about that you get one chance to make that first impression. And what do you say to businesses that maybe have blown their chance? Like the first time they get it right, is there anything they can do to recover from that? Or is it just kind of...
We've all done stupid things. Confession, right? Okay, we've all done stupid things. As small business owners, I've made my mistakes. Let me assure you, I've made a lot of them. So there's never just the one chance. There's just this thing called authenticity. It's going back to people and looking in their eyeballs and going, okay, hey, listen, we're not in the right place right now. We got to get this straightened out. My fault. Let's talk through this. And so just bringing authenticity to the conversation is important because people. You need to reset, and so they need to have a new way to just kind of say, okay, forgive everything from the past, but going forward, let's get this cleaned up. And so that takes some emotional intelligence to be able to do that. And sadly, in most organizations, once it starts to go south, then this thing called gossip starts. And once gossip is in, God bless you, it's going to be very difficult, because how can you lead an organization when people are saying negative things about each other and the very person who's cutting them the payroll check? The person who's signing their check, when they're basically saying, well, you can't trust Tom, you can't trust Pete, you can't trust Julie, because they're the executives, what do they know? And that becomes the conversation. It's like, I've never seen an organization that will thrive financially that has that going on. And so one of the first things we do when we come into an organization is we go to war with gossip, and we make it absolutely unacceptable. It's like, if you got a negative, you can go sideways with, you can go to the person who has done it, or you can go to a supervisor to get help, but you cannot tell anybody else. That's for no one else to hear about. You've got to bring that direct.
So whenever you're addressing feedback with one person, you sit down face to face with them and it's one-on-one.
Right. There's actually research that shows that when you're saying a negative about somebody else, 70% of the time, no, 80% of the time, it's not the truth. And so, like, I just assume if somebody's telling me something negative about somebody else, that it's not the truth. It's kind of like that. That's one side. Let's come on together, Jill. We're going to go talk about this because we've got to, Ashley probably has a different viewpoint here. Let's go together and find that out, because otherwise now I'm contaminated with your viewpoint and I'm thinking terrible things about Ashley because you said something. And if I just,
Not me.
and she's an angel, so how could that be, right?
Right.
Well, let's talk about that. So we kind of had like some hot questions just that we asked some business owners. And one of those questions is like, what are some practical ways to shut down gossip immediately at your place of business?
That's a great question. Okay, so first of all, you need to have a cathartic event. I always call it the kick butt kickoff, where you basically go, I know we've all done it, but now going forward, and let's have compassion. Have we all done it? Have we all listened to it? Okay, so we've all done it. Okay. How does that feel? Not good. Okay, so can we all agree going forward, we're never going to do this again? Okay, good. Okay, and so we have to have that agreement. So if you're not having a big cathartic event, which I strongly recommend because that's the best way to take care of it, then you got to do some one-on-ones with people, and you got to let them know. Listen, there are certain things I will not tolerate. These are non-negotiables in our organization. Having sticky fingers is going to be a problem. That will get you an immediate walk out the door. Sexual harassment is going to get you a walk out the door. Saying something negative about somebody else without having the intention of talking directly to them to have them fix it, or to a supervisor to fix the situation, will get you a walk out the door. Because we just don't allow it, because this needs to be a safe workplace. And if we allow anybody to just have a crazy go at it whenever you disagree with somebody and say something negative, just how safe will you feel in this organization? So this is for the safety of everyone. And so have that be a part of your new employee orientation. And if you have people that you never know that they're doing it, because the CEO is the last person to see it, right? People are clever enough to be political enough to not do it in front of them. But the CEO always can feel it. Like I have had it sneak into my office over the years a couple of different times. And I can know it, and I can know who's doing it, but I can't see it. So it's really hard to confront it. So I think it's on page 145 of the Thank God It's Money book. We have the conversation, which basically goes, I'm really excited about where our company is going. And my sense is you don't share that excitement. That's okay, because if this isn't your thing, you got to go find your thing. So let me know tomorrow at 2 o'clock what you decide. And whatever you decide is good, because you got to decide, are you in or are you out?
Yeah.
And so basically, what you're basically saying is, I'm on to you. And we're not tolerating that anymore. And you have to make a decision. And I've heard many success stories from those 4 steps. As a result of people learning that, they kind of go, oh my gosh, this person, they were just a pain in the back end for so long, and everybody hated working with them, and now they cleaned it up and they're great. Now, will it work 100% of the time? No, but it works a lot of the time. And if it doesn't work, then you have the next obligation, which is you got to protect the rest of your team.
Yeah. I like what you said there about, setting those clear expectations from the start and then holding everybody accountable for that, because accountability has so much to do with holding company culture to a higher standard.
Well, let's talk about accountability, because that's a misunderstood topic too, because everybody thinks like, oh, the executive team is responsible to hold everybody accountable, or the managers are responsible. But actually, it's everybody. Everybody has to hold. So, for instance, if you have customer service standards and you say your customer service standard is answer the phone between the second and the third ring, and then you hear Ashley, she's like, oh, I'm filing my nails, I'm kind of busy, I don't know, I'll put my do not disturb on, forget those customers, they're not that important, I've got my own things going on. And so you see that, the manager didn't see that, but you saw it. And so just like the airport sign, if you see something, say something, the same thing happens in an organization. And so I have a great story about a bank we've been working with for 25 some plus years. And when we first did their kickoff and we talked about the customer service standards, one of the things that they had in their personal appearance standards were that they needed to wear socks between Memorial or after Labor Day and up till Memorial Day. And so one day the CEO, who happened to be a woman, very successful, well-run bank, they just hit one of the 60 highest performing banks in the country. Anyway, so she goes to the restroom. And she calls me right after she goes to the restroom. She says, I just went to the restroom. And I went, that's too much information. You don't have to report and everything. And she says, but the most important, exciting thing happened. I'm like, okay. Like, I'm thinking what comes next here. And she said there was a teller who came into the stall next to me. And she said to me, hey, I'm noticing that you're not wearing socks and it's that time of the year. And so I just wanted to mention to you, we have a standard about that. And she says, now I know we have a healthy culture. Because now when a teller thinks that she can talk to the CEO of the bank about something like that, now I know that we have a team that's holding each other accountable. So that was like a magical moment for her.
Did she go home and change her shoes?
She did. Her socks, yeah.
You're going home.
But she called me first.
I love that story.
That's good.
That's good, but it's so true. If you should be able, one person to the next should be able to call it tight, right?
Yeah.
Because it's your organization. And that's the whole thing. Is like, does everybody act like an owner? Does everybody act like they own this place? Because you are an owner. If you work for a company, you know, we all know those people. They have those resumes and they just keep going from this job to this job to this job to this job to this job. And everywhere they go, they don't appreciate me. They don't treat me well. It's all me, 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 me. Likely they weren't performing well. And so they just keep finding the new place. Okay. So those are not fun people to be working around because we know what's going to happen in the next place and the place after that and the place after that because they haven't yet figured out that I got to grow up now piece. Because when we grow up, we realize that not only are we expected to perform because we all have to do our job because otherwise we're on somebody else's back, but we also have to make sure the organization is doing well. So like how good would it be for your customers if Farmers State Bank wasn't a rock star like you guys are? I mean, like your performance is fantastic. Your culture survey scores are fantastic. Your mystery shopping scores are fantastic. And so you take all those things very seriously. So your customers have a brand promise. They know when they work with Farmers State Bank, it's going to be great. That you're going to have people who care. They're going to be super knowledgeable, far beyond what most bankers are in terms of being able to help. But they're also going to care, and they have systems in place to make that happen. But imagine if a couple people kind of says, whatever, you know, not for me. Is that going to show up to the customer? You better believe it will.
A lot of people say that company culture maybe doesn't go hand in hand with profit, or like they're two separate entities, if you will. Like, would you say that culture and profit definitely walk hand in hand for a business?
There are hundreds of studies.
Love it. Give me a statistic.
That show that not only is culture the leading predictor of future profitability, but it's also the leading predictor of future growth.
Oh, two birds with one stone. Love it.
So everybody, you know, so small business owners, they've heard this word culture. They know it's important. They just don't know how to fix it. It's kind of like I'll get a motivational speaker. Well, good luck on that one. It's kind of like having Chinese food. You're hungry half an hour later, right? You know, and so that was fun. But it's not about the motivational speaker. It's about the systems of culture. And so nobody can have a good culture without the systems. So like you have the systems in place. You have the daily huddles, you have the quarterly celebrations, you have the quarterly reviews. And so basically everybody gets their own little culture score every single quarter. So they know, like, are they showing up? Because it's one thing to say, well, I don't like Charlie because he did whatever. And I don't like the culture because of whatever. Well, what's your culture score? Okay, how are you additive to the organization, or are you taking away? So, you know, it's important for them to get that information. So when people say, well, I'm too busy to do that, I'm like, oh, wow, hang on a second. This is the leading predictor of future growth and profitability, and you don't have enough time to manage that. What are you doing? Okay, because when you're not managing that, you're not taking care of your customers. You're not hanging on to your good people. Revenue is going to suffer, profit's going to suffer. So tell me what's more important than putting your cultural systems in place.
Really good.
Yeah. You know, I think of really successful businesses and people that have really great company culture. So I think of like Chick-fil-A or Lululemon or just, you know, the things that they do and what they're known for. But if you're a business looking at improving your company culture, what is the first thing you can do? I mean, what is that? How do you create something like that in your own business? I mean, I don't know where to start, really.
Well, I think the start is first decide to do it. Okay, you got to take it very seriously, and you can't be a victim to it. So whatever's been happening for the past, forgive yourselves everything. So we have a client that we've been working with for some time, and They had a terrible, terrible, terrible culture when we first started working with them. And in fact, two of the senior executives came to me on my very first day to try to talk negatively about the CEO. And I'm thinking, whoa, do you not know who I am and what I stand for? Do you not think this is going to get reconciled? And so I'm thinking, okay, so you're already speaking badly about the CEO to a stranger walking into your organization. What are you doing with the other employees? And so it was, and I remember the CEO would even call me on Friday, late Friday afternoons, Friday evenings, and he'd just go, is it me? Do I need to quit? Do I need to hire a different CEO? And I said, no, you just have a couple people working so strongly against you that you're not going to get ahead of this until you manage this. And then he did, and they just hit one of the highest culture scores we've ever seen. And he said, and they're also up in that same nosebleed, great profitability, well-run bank like you guys are. And he said, but what I'm most proud of is the culture score, because they came from a living hell. Okay, and so it doesn't matter where you're at; it's just a matter. But he had conviction in his heart. I mean, the fact that he kept calling me and because it's like, Friday nights are kind of my personal time. But he's like, I can talk to you, and I'm like, okay, what's going on now? Because he would just be so annoyed with the things that were going on. And it was just like, okay, you got to put these systems in place, and when you have these systems in place, those behaviors will go away. But until you get those systems in place, those behaviors don't go away, and so it's going to take a little bit of time, but not that long. And so he really went from hell to heaven in about 6 months. But he had to decide, we got to get these systems in place and make sure that these things happen, because then everybody will understand. But it was interesting because the two people who were really bad for the culture were two of the top producers, but the bank is doing far better. Now they're gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when we first enrolled in this transformation, it was kind of like that too. It wasn't right away. And a lot of the people that we originally had on our team, we had those conversations. Once we put our systems in place, everybody agreed on them and committed to them. They're no longer with the bank. And that, it was hard to see.
That was a scary time.
It was
because I wasn't here when that happened. So did you see a deflation in employment? Probably.
Right. It was just a lot of transition, right? It was a lot of turnover but now the right people are on the bus and the right systems are in place, and watching that has been really, really awesome.
And those are hard decisions and hard actions to take. But listen, for everybody, there's a team for them. If somebody is not nice and not kind and gossiping and doing passive-aggressive behaviors and all that crazy-making stuff that people do, and they kind of think this is okay, it's not okay. But there are organizations where that is okay. They should go there. So there's a team for everybody, and people need to go find their team. And you have to decide as a team, here are my lines in the sands, and we just don't tolerate this here, and that's just the way it's going to be. And these are always hard, invariably, not always, but often it's the highest performer, and they're like, well, how do we deal with this? Actually, everybody's going to perform a whole lot better as soon as this is taken care of. And I've seen evidence of that so many times. The first time I ever saw it, I had a CEO who, before we did the kickoff, he called me and he said, Roxanne, I just want you to know the kickoff's next week, but I fired my top 3 producers this week. And I was like, well wait, what? Wow. And I'm thinking, couldn't I had a hack at them next week instead? and so then I asked the obvious question. So what percentage of the portfolio comes from these producers? 60%. And I'm like, whoa, okay. But fascinating, that bank went from being one of the lowest performers to one of the highest performers in their state within 1 year.
Wow.
Because they dealt with it. And so part of it is growing the backbone. You got to have a backbone to deal with those things and just kind of go, hey, we don't do this anymore. And your good people will be so thankful that you're handling those things.
That's very true. That's very true.
I want to say, too, that, in this economy, people are like, well, we can't hire people, so how can I? Well, you can't hire people because you have those people there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know there's a couple of businesses that come to mind that I've had a conversation with just, through our banking relationship that have came in and said, I am so afraid to make a cultural change because I'm running short-staffed. We have this thing that's known as the Great Resignation that happened recently, and they just can't find. So like you said, those performers that are doing well, they're just afraid to make that leap. And so committing and having the backbone, like you talked about, will get them there.
Maybe that's something you can even do for your clients, too, is to maybe have a special session for them to help them understand some of those things. Because sometimes, being a business owner, because I've been an entrepreneur all of my life in multiple different organizations I've owned and run, and it's kind of lonely sometimes because you're kind of on your own. And so like having a group of CEOs kind of come together and kind of, because it's kind of like, I'm having culture problems, I'm having culture problems, I'm having, you know, and to be able to just have confession and then say, okay, we're not going to come and complain next time we get together. We're going to come and tell success stories. So what are you going to do? And what are you going to do? And what are you going to do? And get people engaged in, get over it. You're going to have to figure this out. You just have to figure it out. And it's a dark night of the soul. We've all been through it. There is not a small business owner that has not been drugged through the mud. I've been there. I remember years ago I hired someone to run my business for me. I thought this is going to be great. Everything's going to be easy. And then the whole thing just went nuts. and then I'm on the road 140 days a year while I'm trying to fire this person and get rid of all those people and get all new people in after we had such a great culture. I've been through it. So I can honestly say my heart goes out to you if you're in the middle of this right now. I've been there. It's just awful. And you just got to keep working the systems and moving it through. There's life at the other side of it. And I love my team right now. We just have a blast.
That's amazing. We do too.
We have a blast at Farmers State Bank, for sure.
I know you have a blast. It shows here.
Yeah. My friends, it's so funny because I'm 25 and I've had like a couple jobs since college, and so have my friends, and they're always like, my friends are in the medical field, and they're like, I want to work at Farmers State Bank because it's just like Disney World. I'm like, I know, but I got the job. So, well, Roxanne, this has been amazing talking to you today. If you could leave our listeners with any piece of advice about culture or anything you want to say, because you have wonderful wealth of knowledge, what would you say to them?
I think I'd like to say, you know, have hope for possibility. And so wherever you are right now, you know, Gallup has research that came out recently that showed that culture scores are way down, and kind of a 10-year low right now. You know, and you think about young people with inflation, no matter what they're getting for wage increases, they're not getting ahead. So it used to be at least you felt like you were getting ahead in life, and so they're getting behind financially. Their culture scores are terrible all across them internationally, and so people aren't happy at work, so they're coming and they're working around miserable people, and it's like, okay, you got to decide if you're going to do, you know, my dad said this about 1,000 times to me, if everybody jumps off the cliff, are you going to jump off the cliff too? Okay, just because culture is bad most everywhere, are you really going to have that experience? And I agree with the Lululemon thing. Every time I walk into Lululemon, I'm like, where do you find these people? Every one of them is alive and passionate and trying to find the right thing for you, and they care, and they don't make those mistakes. They just have good people. But listen, if any one of their stores allowed somebody to be hanging around that didn't fit in, you got to know that the whole thing's going down. And so it's about making a decision, regardless of where you're at. So just know that if it's bad right now, you can make it great. It doesn't have to stay bad. And it is the leading predictor of future growth and profitability. So I have no ears for I'm too busy for this.
That's great. Thank you so much, Roxanne, for being here.
It has been my honor. And thank you so much for what you do at Farmers State Bank. You guys, you have that fancy car out there that has the Extraordinary Bank of the Year award. So you are the bank this year, which is like mind-boggling. One bank in the entire nation. That's kind of a big deal. And you've earned it. You've earned it through your culture scores, your client experience ratings, your well-run bank, like what you do in the community. I mean, you just are doing it all. I'm so excited for what you're doing for this community. It's a game changer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining us for this episode of Isn't That Rich? And we will see you next week.
See you next week. So Jill, where do we go from here?
Be sure to check out our show notes for this episode, and also be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.